All righty, we are about time to start, I think. We're in Daniel chapter 10 tonight. And I think there's still some handouts back there on that folding chair in case you didn't get one. Might help you. You'll find it useful, maybe not. Go by the clock on the wall and not the bell, because that clock on the wall says it's time. So we'll get started. Daniel chapter 10. One of the things that you need to know about chapters 10, 11, and 12 are they're really one event. And why they drew the line where they did, nobody seems to know. It's not really at a good breaking point. Most people like to at least verse 1 of chapter 11 before they cut off chapter 10. Some don't. Thought runs from chapter 10:1 through the end of chapter 12. And nowhere else in New Testament or Old Testament scripture, nor really in the Bible itself, is prophecy in as much detail as it is in chapter 11. It's one of the reasons that people would prefer to chunk Daniel out of the Bible. God's not supposed to know everything like that. I don't know, I thought God had all knowledge, right? Yeah, well, people don't believe that God should have that much specificity in his knowledge. And if you read chapter 11, which I hope you will before next week, because it reads like a soap opera. The only difference is it's real life. And looking back, you can see that it actually happened, which is what really grits some people because they don't think God should be able to do that. So they think Daniel was written after the fact and just kind of manufactured, so it shouldn't be in the Bible, or that God should not have that kind of knowledge. But the God that I know has that kind of knowledge. He knows, as the psalmist said, the words before they ever get to my mouth. Before they're ever on the tip of my tongue, God knows them. Well, he also knew that I would exist in the year 2022. Way back there. He also knows the events that will be recorded in chapter 11, primarily with reference to the Greek Empire. There's only about the first two verses of chapter 11 that deal with the Persian Empire. And the rest of that then deals with the Greek Empire. And then a lot of it, especially toward the tail end, deals with Antiochus IV Epiphanes, of course, the guy that just wreaked havoc on the Jewish nation. So anyway, consider it is all one thought from chapter 10 through chapter 12. Also, in chapter 10, there's some unique clues concerning the work of angels that are found nowhere else in the Bible. As we mentioned before, there are only two angels that actually have their names recorded in the Bible, and both of those are recorded here in Daniel, that being Michael and Gabriel. And Gabriel, we know, pops up in the New Testament early on with prophecy of John the Baptist and the prophecy of Jesus. And then, of course, Michael will appear in Jude and also in Revelation. So these two guys, and we don't necessarily know that that Gabriel back here and Michael back here are Gabriel and Michael over here. I mean, there could be two angels, with the same name. Like I said before, first grade class, there were about 7 Davids in there. So we all had David in our middle initial, so the teacher could tell us apart. And right around here, there's a few Davids running around. So could be there are more angels with those names. I don't know. But we'd sort of assume it's the same angel. And in that case, there are only two that are named in the Bible, Michael and Gabriel. When did this event occur? It occurred in the 3rd year of Cyrus, the king of Persia. And this is in his 3rd year after conquering Babylon. He was actually made king of Persia 20 years earlier, but did not conquer Babylon until 539 BC. So it's at that point that the clock starts as far as Daniel's concerned. So this is now the third year of Cyrus's reign after having conquered Babylon. So it's 2 years after Cyrus has issued the decree that the Jews are free to go home. That they can go back to Jerusalem if they want to. And so they do. Also, the latest date, giving you a list of the dates, 1-1. Well, sounds like I got it. Maybe, I don't know. Maybe it's going to go in and out on me. That's not good. I got batteries over there if I need them, so if it goes completely, let me know. We'll try it again. Latest date in the Bible occurs here, occurs here. All right. Let's see if maybe a battery change will help. All right, we'll give it a fresh start and see if that helps. Maybe the batteries were just weak. If not, maybe we got a loose connection somewhere. So anyway, chapter 10, verse 1, Daniel talks about himself in the third person, which is kind of interesting. In the next verse, he's going to switch back to first person for the rest of the chapter. But in this very first verse, he's using himself in third person, which is always an interesting kind of thing. He uses also his Hebrew name Dan and his Babylonian name Belteshazzar. Now, nobody really knows for sure why he did that, but maybe the idea was he's identifying himself as the Daniel from way back in the first of this book, because this is almost 70 years later. And we guessed early on he was about 15 when he was taken captive. So that being the fact, he is about 85 years old now. Some people would question maybe if this is the same Daniel, but he is kind of nailing down that fact by, I am Daniel, the one who was known as Belteshazzar here in Babylon. So he's getting up in years. We don't really know how long he lived or when and where he died, but we know, at least based on our guesstimate of him being 15 when he was taken captive, he's at least 85. He notes about his message that it is true, and it concerned a great war or a great conflict, or other versions would say it was both true and burdensome. So it could be something that's just weighing heavily on him, but it could also be in reference to the conflict that is being described in chapter 11, because there's a conflict between the Greeks and the Persians, and we talked about that way back when we first started talking about these guys, how the Persians kept attacking these little Greek states, but kept getting beat back, until finally Philip comes along and unites all these Greek states and forms an army, trains them. He dies, but his son Alexander, known as Alexander the Great, takes that army and just wipes out the Persians and everybody else. So there's that conflict that's mentioned here. But then a greater conflict is the conflict that exists between two of the four generals that would come out of Alexander the Great, because Alexander conquered the world, but he didn't live long enough to enjoy it. He died early on. And the four generals then split it territory. And the ones, of course, that we mentioned before that we need to be concerned about the most are the Seleucids, that get the area around Syria, and the Ptolemies that take Egypt and North Africa region, and they also have Palestine early on, but they end up losing Palestine to the Seleucids, and hence the war back and forth. The trouble with this whole thing, the war back and forth between Syria and Egypt, is Palestine's in the middle. So they get walked on every time, going back and forth. And sometimes, just for the meanness of it, they would divert going back and forth and just whoop up on Palestine just for the fun of it. So Israel's catching it from all sides. And then, of course, one who would follow in the Seleucid line is Antiochus IV Epiphanes, that just has his own agenda, and as I said before, wreaks havoc on the people of Israel. So all of this is going to be detailed in chapter 11. So at this time, Daniel says that he mourned for 3 weeks. He ate no choice food, and this is literally 3 weeks of days, which kind of differentiates the 3 weeks of years in chapter 9. So we're talking 3 weeks of days here, 21 days. But there's no reason really given for his mourning. A couple of options, though. 2 years earlier, as I said before, Cyrus has issued this decree, recorded in Ezra 1:1, that the Jews can go back to their homeland if they want to. But about the time they get back there and they start ruling, all the other nations start coming over and interfering, to the point that they eventually grind down to a halt the work that was being done. And in Ezra 4 and 5, it kind of lays that out, that work had come to a complete stoppage. And so they end up having to appeal at that point to Darius, who would be the follow-on leader, in order to get things cleared up so that they go back to work again. So it could be that this is something that Daniel is mourning about, that work had started, they had gone back, but now it had ground to a halt, so we're not getting the work done that we want it done. Another reason could be that he wanted more information about the visions and the prophecies that he's already received. The prophecies in 7, 8, and 9, they weren't crystal clear for us, right? Well, they probably were even less clear to him, although maybe he had a little bit of extra help, not only from the God too, to help and better than what we had. History on our side, so we can easily point to the things that are back there and say, this is that and this is something else, but have that because he's looking in the forward direction to something that has not happened yet. His fasting was such a long period, it's evidence of his deep humility toward God. It says that he did not eat any tasty food, and that it's an interesting word. For the tasty is cham, which is actually the same word translated in the highly esteemed. So it's actually the word that's used to refer to Daniel as being highly esteemed. Well, that word can be desirable or choice, hence its use for food. So just like Daniel was esteemed in the sight of God, he ate was not highly esteemed. Some of the commentators think he probably drank water and ate vegetables like he did in chapter 1 when he was first taken captive. Food here in the Hebrew is lakim, which is bread. So literally translated bread. So that's what he did. And then another part of his morning ritual is that he refrained from of ointment or perfumed oils. And, back in that day and time, they didn't have deodorant like we do. And they didn't have the other kinds of soap products and powders and whatever to help take care of bodily odor. So it was very common to use these oils, perfumed oils, and ointment to aid in their personal care. It kept the skin soft, it protected it from the sun, and it also diminished body odor rather. You can find that in Ecclesiastes 9 and Song of Solomon 1, Song of Solomon 4. Perfumed oils were symbolic of joy and feasting, so that would be just the opposite of what Daniel is trying to convey here. In Psalm 45 and Proverbs 27 and Amos 6 all talk about that joy and feasting with the perfumed oils as part of that. And those who were in mourning often neglected their use, like Ruth 3, 2 Samuel 12, and 2 Samuel 14. This was not just a time of mourning and fasting for Daniel, it was also an intense time of prayer. Daniel was a man of prayer, as we've discussed before, and this was certainly a time of prayer for him. Now, the interesting thing is, he says this was in the first month. And if you know about Jewish history, the first month, the month of Abib or Nisan, I think early on it was called Abib, later it was called Nisan. But anyway, the first month is very important in the Jewish calendar because the 14th day of the month is the Passover. They celebrate the Passover on the 14th day of the first month of their year. And then days 15 through 21, the Feast of Unleavened Bread. So Daniel has just fasted through the most important feasting time of the Jewish calendar. And who knows but what that's not part of what he's mourning in this particular situation. That here I am at 85 and I still haven't gotten back to Jerusalem, still have not gotten back to the temple, still have not been able to celebrate the Passover and the Feast of Unleavened Bread where I want to celebrate it, as I did as a kid. So this is probably going on in the back of his mind too. And I gave you several verses that refer to over in the Feast of Unleavened Bread and its timing. So anyway, this vision occurs on the 24th day of the month. So that's 3 days after the end of the Passover, or the Feast of Unleavened Bread. And it happened on the Tigris River, which the Tigris and the Euphrates together, and then they flow into the sea. But the Euphrates River runs right through Babylon. Tigris River, a little further over, is about, they're guessing, about 50 miles away from where he was. So he's not in Babylon anymore. Now he is over into Persia. Why? We don't know. Could be that he was sent there for some reason, but we don't have information that would tell us one way or the other on that. He looks up and he sees a man. But this is not just any old man. This is a man that is arrayed and displayed in such a fashion as to say he's not a normal man. This is some kind of heavenly body that is in front of me here. It says that he's dressed in linen, which would indicate royalty, because priests and royalty are the only ones that had linen. Nobody else did. A belt of the finest gold around his waist. They believe that was probably gold thread that was used in a sash, because later Jesus in Revelation is mentioned as having that type of sash, as well as the elders, I think, in Revelation also having that kind of gold sash. So that's believed what it was. His body was like chrysolite, his face like lightning, eyes like flaming torches, arms and legs, his voice like the sound of a multitude. Some people have even said that, well, this was the pre-incarnate Jesus. Well, kind of got a hard time with that one, because this guy's going to say later, I was duking it out with the prince of Persia until helped me. Now, anybody believes Jesus needs help? Yeah, scratch that. It's not Jesus. Not pre-incarnate Jesus either, because he didn't need help. An angel? Okay, maybe this angel needed help from another angel. And when Michael showed up, then he was able to get on with doing what he was doing. They typically will refer to Ezekiel 1, 25 through 28, and also Revelation 1, 12 through 16 for a comparison. Ezekiel, I'm thinking we probably got an angel there too. Revelation, we definitely have the Son of God there. So people are guessing who this might be. Some pre-incarnate Son of God, but like I said, he needed help, so it's not him. Others say Gabriel, but he's met Gabriel before. He's talked to Gabriel. He knows Gabriel by name. So probably not Gabriel, but my guess would be some other angel. So how did he react to meeting him? Well, it was kind of like it was when Saul met Jesus. He heard this angel, but nobody else in the crowd did. But they heard something, and they cleared out, ran and hid. They wanted no part of this. They were leaving Daniel high and dry, all by himself. And Daniel was so frightened that he fainted. And this is not the first time that he's passed out, because he did the same thing back in chapter 7, verse 28, and also in chapter 8, verses 17 and 18. Meeting a heavenly body like that has an awesome effect on your body. And it certainly did with Daniel. How was he strengthened? It's really interesting here. The man in the vision begins by encouraging Daniel, announcing that he is highly esteemed by God. Not only is he highly esteemed, but he has been sent. This angel to Daniel's prayers. You're the reason I'm here, because of your prayers. And then there's a pattern that takes place of comforting Daniel. In verse 10, he was touched and lifted up. It said he came up to his knees, but he was still trembling. In verse 16, he was touched and enabled to speak, because he was totally speechless before that. And in verse 18, he was touched and he was strengthened. In verses 12 and 19, Daniel was told not to be afraid. And part of this was because he was highly esteemed, as is mentioned in verses 11 and 19. So there's a loving relationship between Daniel and John would say, perfect love casts out fear, 1 John 4:18. And Daniel responds, my Lord, speak. And you know what? That should be our attitude too. And maybe we need to take it as seriously as Daniel did, not just talking to an angel, because odds are we're not going to talk to an angel. But before we dive into the Word expecting God to talk to us, maybe we need to consider prayer and fasting to show God, to tell God that we are interested in devoting ourselves to your talking to me, to you advising me. A lot of times we dive into the Bible thinking we already know what it's going to say, instead of going there to let God speak to us. The man told Daniel, the very first day that you set your heart on understanding this and humbling yourself before God, your words were heard. Prayer is answered. The very first day. Now this is 24 days later, right? First 21, he'd been fasting, and this is 3 days after that, after the end of the Feast of Unleavened Bread. The very first day you were heard, and the answer was being sent. He continued by saying, don't be afraid, Daniel. Since the first your mind on gaining understanding and humbling yourself before God, you heard, and I have come in response to them. This angel was the answer to his prayer. Text indicates that God gave Daniel a new revelation because of his desire to understand. The angel appeared to Daniel to reveal to him what would happen in the later days, that is, in the days of the future. And the time frame is determined by chapter 11. It's going to set it right there for the Persian and Greek empires. And the conflicts between the Persians and the Greeks, between the Seleucids in Syria and the Ptolemies in Egypt, and also Antiochus IV Epiphanes and the Jewish nation. Verse 13 just really kind of wraps you around the axle, doesn't it? I don't know about you, but I've never really thought that angels had problems. And yet, this angel tells Daniel, I would have been here a long time ago, but I was busy. Isn't that interesting? He would have had his answer 21 days ago, except he got busy along the way. The word angel actually means messenger, but the word is angelos in the Greek, and we just transliterated it. In other words, we did not translate it, because if we had translated it, it would have just been messenger. Instead, we transliterated it, which means we created a new word that's similar to the Greek word, and it's angel. Brand spanking new word. It's kind of like baptize. That's not a translation. If it was, it would have been immersed. But we transliterated baptizo into baptize, created a new word. Why do we do that? I don't know. He continued in this struggle until Michael showed up, and when Michael showed up, then he could come on. So we know this is not Michael that's standing in front of him. It's probably not Gabriel that's standing in front of him. We know it's not Jesus because Jesus didn't need help. So Michael wouldn't be helping Jesus out to get there. But it's somebody else. It's an indication of a specific struggle, but its manner and its specifics we do not know. As a matter of fact, of the Persian kingdom. We don't even know who that is. Was that Cyrus? Was Cyrus, was he channeling Cyrus, influencing Cyrus to keep doing the right thing? Was it such a problem that he had to keep doing that? Or was there somebody like him that wore the bad suit? You got good guys and you got bad guys. Well, maybe you got good angels, you got bad angels. And maybe this was confronting another angel that wore Satan's hat, that was trying to influence the Persian leader to go one direction while he's trying to influence the Persian leader to go in another direction. I don't know. You can figure it out too. It's great. I don't have to create them, and you guys can figure them out. I love it. But he was stuck there for 21 days. So the entire time that Daniel had been mourning, fasting, and praying, this angel had been tied up trying to get the answer to Daniel. We don't know who he was dealing with. Could have been Cyrus. Could have been an angel. There was a bad angel. Oh, what did this angel do when Daniel became speechless? If everything else hadn't done that, me speechless. To hear that God's angels have problems, God's angels have to deal with issues, too, I think. So what did he do? Well, Daniel got his face toward the ground, he was speechless. But the one who looked like a man, all angels look like men. Do you notice that? Each time, look like a man. Touched my lips, opened my mouth, I was able to speak. It's similar to Isaiah in Isaiah 7, where a seraph took a live coal and touched Isaiah. Touched his lips so that he could speak God's word to the Israelite nation. Yeah. He says he is in anguish and he's helpless. This word anguish, T-S-I-R is the Hebrew word there, but it denotes intense suffering. It's sometimes used for the pain of a woman in labor, as you can find in 1 Samuel 4 and Isaiah 21. The interaction between this celestial being left the prophet physically and emotionally exhausted. He had absolutely no strength left, and he says, I don't even have breath left in me. So what does the angel do? He touches him. The one who looked like a man touched the prophet, and he was strengthened. So then, he says, well, I need to encourage this man. He's exhausted. Physically, emotionally, spiritually, he's exhausted. I need to encourage him. I need to build him up because I'm fixing to lay him. Esteemed. Peace. Be strong. Now be strong. I like a different version of that. In verse 19, O man of high esteem, do not be afraid. Peace be with you. Take courage and be courageous. The same words were spoken back in verse 11 and 12, where he talks about, O man of high esteem, do not be afraid. Peace to you and Take courage. Be courageous. Peace be with you is a common greeting in the Near East. But not only does it mean peace, but it also has to do with your health, and it has to do with your well-being. And certainly somebody that is exhausted, he's totally out of breath, and it's spoken to him by an angel, it probably means all of that. May you have peace. May your welfare be good. May your health improve. You know, I want the best for you. That's what it means, the shalom, as the Hebrew would be. Take courage and be courageous. It's similar to the admonitions that Moses and Joshua gave the children of Israel in Deuteronomy and also in Joshua when they were encouraging them. Let's go into this battle because we're going to win. God's with us. Stay on board. Then he tells Daniel, you know, there's some things I got to do. Some things I got to do. But first, let me make it clear. Do you know why I'm here? Isn't that interesting? The angel, that's a rhetorical question, I'm sure, because he's already told him why he's here. But he asked Daniel first, do you know why I'm here? Well, of course, you're here because I prayed for an answer. God sent you with an answer. But then the angel says, I've got to deal with the Persians, the Persian king primarily, or kings, because there's going to be several of them. Well, it had to do with returning to the promised land. It had to do with rebuilding the temple. It had to do with rebuilding Jerusalem. It had to do with protecting the Jewish nation at the time of Esther. All of these things were taking place under the Persian kings. This angel is going to take care of that. Isn't that good? Got an angel who's going to take care of that. But then he says, after that, I got to take care of the Greek kings. So there's some more history coming after that, and I've got to watch over the Greek kings and make sure they stay in line. Isn't that something? But he says, before all of that, though, there's a message that was given to me that I need to give to you that is inscribed in the writing of truth. Now, yours may say that it was in the scripture of truth. I think the New King James says that. The NIV says the book of truth. The writing of truth is what the American Standard says. But it's referring to some kind of heavenly book, but in all likelihood is just an allusion to or imagery of the foreknowledge of God. God knows all that history. And maybe he's already written it down. I don't know. If he has, then there is this book of truth that the angel is referring to when he to you what is already written in the book of truth. So he said back in the very beginning, this is true and it's burdensome. And now he's saying, what I'm giving you is written in the book of truth. This is truth that is coming up. And like I said, we've got history to look back on. We know chapter 11 is true. And it is scarily accurate in the predictions that he makes to Daniel. It deals with the Greek Empire, deals with the Promised Land, it deals with being caught in the middle of the Seleucids in Syria, and all the havoc that Antiochus IV Epiphanes was going to wreak upon the Jewish nation. So the chapter concludes with the angel saying, yet there is no one who stands firmly with me against these forces except Michael, your prince. Michael, your prince. What does that mean? Does it mean Michael is the prince responsible for Israel? Could be. Or Michael is a prince responsible for Daniel? Could be. You know, there's an interesting thing that takes place in the book of Revelation, along about chapter 12, verses 7 through 12, when Michael and his angels, that's an interesting phrase, isn't it? Michael and his angels wage war against the great dragon who has already been defined as Satan. And they cast him out. They cast him out. Now, if I take that and put it together with what I've got back in Daniel, to me, I would interpret Michael as being the archangel. He is described as being the archangel in Jude 9. I would say that he is the archangel of spiritual Israel. Because why would he be waging war in heaven? A spiritual battle up there, and yet he's also waging war back here at the time of Daniel, the different Israel, right? This is just my small mind putting that together. Y'all can figure out who you think Michael is or what his responsibilities are. But I'm going to say he's the archangel over spiritual Israel. So at that time, it was physical Israel. This time, it's you and me. He's our chief guy. Chief messenger. He's not somebody we bow down to. He's not somebody we worship. Matter of fact, Colossians says, don't you dare worship angels. And Paul would go further and he'd say, don't even listen to anybody, or even an angel from heaven, if he's going to teach you something different than what is written down here. Let him be accursed. I'll say it again, if I or anybody else teach anything different than what's right here, let him be accursed. So angels are not for worship. Angels are messengers. But angels are doing some other things. And I don't understand exactly what all they are. But I know they're on God's bidding and they're for our benefit. So in that, I'm encouraged. We're going to hear more about Michael in chapter 12. But I throw that one out there just to confuse you, I guess. No, really, to make you scratch your head and think, why is Michael mentioned over and over again? Not only here in Daniel, but also in the New Testament. What about Gabriel? Maybe he's like Michael's right-hand guy. Maybe he's another archangel. I don't know. And who's this that was talking? Is he the same one that touched Daniel 3 times? Or was there yet another angel here? I don't know. There are some truths that we can learn about this passage, though. There's more. The first one is, there is more going on in this world than what meets the eye. God is working behind the scenes. God is working for you and for me. You know, Paul would say that we're not wrestling with physical things, but rather with principalities and powers. Things that you can't see, but they're very real. Just like Satan's very real. And just like Satan probably has angels too that are very real. That are tapping you on the shoulder and say, hey, why don't you go this way, David? Hey, why don't you go this way, David? Hopefully there's another angel, maybe Gabriel, maybe this unknown angel here, or Michael saying, no, David, don't do that. Or maybe the spirit within me that's saying, don't do that. You see, there's more pulling for you and me than there is for the opposite side. And God's going to win anyway. God's arranged it that way. There's more pulling for you and me than lean toward God. Well, the second thing is there's a spiritual war that's occurring alongside all the physical things that you're dealing with each and every day. And sometimes we fail to realize that. The physical things that we deal with in and around our life, we are also in a spiritual battle day in and day out all of our lives. The third thing is we have more weapons at our disposal than we know. Do you ever think to God about something that He sends an angel to go take care of it? I didn't get the answer. Well, maybe the angel's busy. This angel was busy for 3 weeks, right? We didn't get the answer we want right now. The angel was busy for 3 weeks. And there was Daniel. Daniel was a highly esteemed man of God. He's been told he's highly esteemed 3 times in this book. It took 3 weeks for him to get an answer. Might take a little while for you too. And we need to prepare ourselves to hear God speak. We should be more like Daniel before we open our Bibles and gear up to expose to. Thank you very much. 11 next week. You need to read it ahead of time. I'm telling you, it's like a soap opera. And we'll see if we can decipher some of it. But it's fascinating. Thanks again.